Georgina Vance was not merely a passenger. She was an orchestrator of logistics, a conductor of commerce, and a firm believer that time was her only true non-renewable resource. At 38, she had climbed the financial analysis ladder at breakneck speed, achieving a senior directorial role that required her to treat her body and mind as finely tuned instruments. This long-haul flight from London to Singapore was the single most crucial component of her next 48 hours. She was due to spearhead the final negotiation phase of a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure deal, a deal that demanded her at peak performance, razor-sharp and utterly rested. The price tag on her business-class ticket, a figure close to £5,000, was not an extravagance. It was a non-negotiable insurance policy. It purchased 8 hours of horizontal, uninterrupted sleep, a controlled environment of quiet dignity, and the promise of a mental reset that would allow her to step off the plane feeling ready to conquer a continent. She was the first to board her section of the premium cabin, her efficiency dictating a specific ritual. She settled into her personalized suite 4A by the window, a self-contained cocoon designed to insulate her from the world. The leather was supple, the ambient lighting was a soft, neutral beige, and the air was still, scented only by the faintest hint of new upholstery. She slipped on her Bose QC headphones, placing them around her neck, ready to activate the noise cancellation the moment the door closed. She took out her slim briefcase, placed her presentation notes discreetly in the side pocket, and opened her Kindle, anticipating a half-hour of focused reading before the pre-takeoff champagne service began. This was her sanctuary, her decompression chamber. The quiet, however, was short-lived. The general boarding call for business-class passengers was made, and then came the family. They were three, a couple in their early 30s and a small boy, perhaps 4 years old, who seemed to possess an almost unnatural level of boisterousness. "Look, Daddy." "The bed!" the boy shrieked, his voice utterly devoid of volume control, echoing off the high bulkheads. Georgina recognized the telltale signs immediately. This was likely their first experience in business class. There was an air of overwhelmed excitement and a visible lack of the practiced, understated demeanor usually found in this cabin. The parents, laden with slightly too much hand luggage, a brightly colored backpack, a novelty pillow, a small plastic scooter strapped to a duffel bag, were visibly struggling to navigate the narrow aisles while simultaneously managing the child. They were seated directly across the aisle from Georgina, in 4D and 4F. The boy, who she mentally cataloged as the source, was placed in the window seat. Brave, the mother wrestled with the luggage, bumping it against the pristine white cabinet doors. The father attempted to strap the highly resistant child into his seat, a task that involved grunts, sudden bursts of strained laughter, and the boy's repeated, piercing declaration of, "I don't want to sit down. I want to press the buttons." The noise cancellation on Georgina's headphones suddenly became a desperate necessity. She switched them on, and the world muted, compressing the boy's shouts into a distant underwater buzzing. She attempted to regain her focus, tracing the words on her Kindle screen, but the physical reality of the chaos seeped in. She could feel the vibrations of the parents' frustrated movements, and every time the boy's small, frantic hand slapped the plastic divider, a sharp thwack cut through the electronic silence. "Welcome aboard. Madam, can I offer you a pre-takeoff drink?" The attendant's smooth voice was a momentary relief, a return to the expected order. Georgina accepted the champagne, nodding her thanks, her eyes lingering for a moment on the attendant's face. She saw a flicker of shared commiseration, an acknowledgement of the abnormal state of the cabin. As the door closed and the aircraft pushed back, the father gave up the battle for the seatbelt and simply held the boy tightly in his lap. The boy responded by kicking his legs against the plastic shell of the seat in front of him, a steady, rhythmic drumming that Georgina could feel through the structure of the plane itself. The takeoff roll was usually Georgina's favorite part of the flight, the majestic roar, the feeling of acceleration, the triumphant lift into the sky. Today, it was a backdrop to escalating domestic turmoil. The pressure change made the boy's ears pop, and he began to cry. Not a simple soothing sob, but a full-throated, ear-splitting wail of genuine distress that utterly overwhelmed the noise cancellation feature. Georgina felt the first hard knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. Her plan was already compromised. She was spending precious mental energy trying to block out stimuli instead of relaxing into the flight. Once the seatbelt sign was extinguished, the mother immediately began rooting through a large, brightly patterned bag, pulling out various brightly colored distractions, a light-up spinner toy, a talking plastic animal, and finally a bottle of milk. The boy instantly quieted, focusing his energy on the sensory overload of his new toys. Georgina sighed internally, realizing her sleep window was rapidly shrinking. She knew she had to eat quickly, and then somehow carve out 6 consecutive hours of rest. The cabin lights dimmed, casting long, peaceful shadows that mocked the underlying tension. The dinner service began. The other passengers, a mix of tired executives, a quiet couple, and the elderly gentleman from the window seat ahead of Georgina, conducted themselves with the silent, reserved efficiency that defines business-class etiquette. They worked, they read, or they simply waited, their expectation of peace absolute. Then came the milk incident. The boy, having consumed half the bottle, decided he was done. Rather than handing it to his mother, who was distracted by wrestling the bulky seat menu, he executed a perfect sweeping arc of his arm. The bottle, half full of liquid, flew through the air, narrowly missing the head of the cabin manager, and impacted the tray table of the passenger in the pod next to him. The resulting sound was a sickening splat, followed by the clatter of the plastic bottle. Milk, thick and white, splashed across the man's dark suit jacket, soaking into the starched napkin he had just unfolded, and pooled dangerously close to his laptop, which was thankfully closed. A collective intake of breath swept through the immediate area. The victim, a man in his late 50s with an impeccably tailored, obviously expensive suit, looked down at the milky, ruined fabric with an expression of utterly exhausted defeat. He simply closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. The mother gasped, her face flushing crimson, her voice rising to a frantic pitch that was almost as disruptive as the initial mess. The flight attendants, trained in crisis management, descended instantly. They were kind, efficient, but the mood had been irreparably shattered. The father muttered something about the milk being just water-based, a futile attempt to minimize the dry cleaning bill. The whole process, the dabbing, the apologetic murmurs, the man being escorted to the washroom to try and salvage his suit, took a crucial 20 minutes of the meal service. Georgina watched, feeling a cold fury bubbling up. This wasn't merely an inconvenience. It was a visible destruction of the environment she had paid so handsomely to secure. The cost of the dry cleaning, the cost of the lost time, the cost of the ruined meal, it was all secondary to the profound cost of the stolen piece. She managed to eat a few bites of her grilled chicken, the taste of which was now overshadowed by the acrid, lingering scent of commercial carpet cleaner. The lights went down for the official sleep cycle. Georgina activated the full recline, pulled her heavy duvet over her, and placed her eye mask on, switching her headphones to their highest volume setting, playing a specifically curated playlist of binaural beats and white noise. The quiet lasted less than 10 minutes. The boy, the source, apparently found the darkness stimulating. He began what Georgina could only classify as a sustained theatrical performance. He was whispering loudly, then giggling, then suddenly demanding water. "Mummy, I want the blue light on. Turn the blue light on." The blue mood light, designed for gentle ambiance, was switched on and off, then on again, its glow washing across Georgina's partially closed pod door every time it flickered. Georgina tried to rationalize. He's a child. This is a temporary situation. Focus on the breathing. Focus on the money. You bought this time. You must claim it. She failed. She lay there, rigid, listening to the tiny, maddening sounds that now seemed amplified. The boy, chewing on a piece of plastic. The soft thump of his foot against the partition. The mother's intermittent, weary shushing. At 2 a.m. Singapore time, Georgina gave up on sleep. She sat up, flipped on her personal overhead lamp, and pulled out her presentation notes. If she couldn't sleep, she would work. Her brain, however, was already operating on a deficit, running slow and thick. She tried to analyze the complex financial model for the infrastructure deal. She needed to verify the elasticity of the projected debt-to-equity ratio under 3 different adverse scenarios. The numbers, usually crystalline clear, blurred on the page. Her concentration, typically a steel trap, had the resilience of wet cardboard. The boy was now playing a game that involved dropping small metal objects, likely the cutlery from his children's meal, onto the floor and then demanding his father retrieve them. Clink. Thud. "Daddy!" "I lost it." Scrape, grunt, clink, thud. Georgina looked up. Across the aisle, the elderly gentleman who had been struck by the bottle, Mr. Henderson, was also awake. He was sitting bolt upright, his newspaper folded neatly on his tray table, his face a picture of serene, scholarly frustration. Their eyes met over the top of the dividing screen. There was no need for words. The shared understanding of the travesty of the flight was a profound, silent covenant. Mr. Henderson leaned slightly toward the aisle and whispered across the gap, his voice barely audible even in the quiet cabin. "Expensive noise, isn't it?" Georgina offered a tight, bitter smile. A truly exorbitant rate of hourly disruption.